I cooked my birthday dinner in the villa my late husband built, but when evening came all I got was a text. While I blew out the candles alone, they were raising champagne glasses on a cruise paid for with my life savings. I smiled, then sold everything. If you think this is just another ordinary family story, you're dead wrong. Subscribe now to catch the full film and more shocking revenge stories from us. The wind off the lake moved like a sigh through the reeds as Evelyn Tran stepped barefoot onto the veranda. A pale robe fluttered around her ankles, her thin shoulders squared against the crisp morning air. 69 today. She stood at the railing of her Lakeview estate and watched the sun stretch its light over the water like paint on canvas, soft, golden, indifferent. From this angle, the lake looked eternal, as if time had never touched it. But her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the teacup knew better. Her knuckles, knotted by the early stages of arthritis, remembered everything time had taken. She turned back inside. The grand hallway welcomed her with silence. Gone were the days of footsteps thudding down the stairs, of doors slamming, of laughter rising from the kitchen like steam. The sound of this house now was the tick of the antique clock and the whisper of her slippers on hardwood. Evelyn moved with deliberate grace. Every part of this house, every creaking floorboard, every hairline crack in the plaster held the ghost of a memory. She paused briefly by the piano untouched for 15 years and rested her fingers over a dusty key. She didn't press it, didn't need to. She could still hear Richard playing Chopin's Nocturne even after all this time. That melody lived in her. The dining room waited as it always did. The table, a mahogany beast of inheritance, stood polished and dressed with fresh linen. 7 place settings, 7 napkins folded just so. She'd spent the evening prior laying out hand-lettered name cards: Vanessa David, Sophie Eric, and the 3 grandchildren whose laughter had once echoed under these vaulted ceilings. She sat down and stared at her own name card, Evelyn. Just 7 letters, and yet they now sat alone. In the kitchen, the kettle hissed its protest. She rose, poured hot water over jasmine leaves in the cracked wedding teapot, and glanced at the clock. 9:14 a.m. Still early. Still hope. She had time. She reached for her phone. The first call went to Vanessa, the oldest, always ambitious, always unavailable. Evelyn knew not to expect much. Vanessa's attention had always come with terms and conditions. The phone rang twice. Mom. Hey, Vanessa's voice chirped. I was just about to call you. Evelyn smiled, polite. I beat you to it, sweetheart. I was just checking. Are you still coming for dinner? A pause. That beat of hesitation Evelyn had come to know too well. Oh, dinner. Right. Look, Mom, I really wanted to, but there's a last-minute investor meeting. We're talking serious capital. I tried pushing it, but you know how these things go. Evelyn's smile didn't falter, but her stomach did. Of course, she said gently. But I'll send flowers, and I think David's still coming. He didn't mention anything. I haven't heard from him. Probably forgot to text. You know him. I do, Evelyn replied. Well, happy birthday, Mom. Seriously. I'll make it up to you next week, okay? Of course, dear. Click. She set the phone down and stared out the window. The lake unchanged, but inside the current shifted. She called David next. Her second child. The dependable one, or at least he used to be. He answered after the 4th ring, his voice thick with something between guilt and sleep. Mom. Hi, David, just checking in. Dinner's still on tonight. A long sigh. Yeah, about that. Sophie's not feeling great. Something she ate, I think. We're gonna lay low. I see. But I'll send the wine you like. That French one from Napa. That's thoughtful. Happy birthday, Mom. And then the line went dead again. She didn't call Sophie. There was no point. That girl had opinions about Evelyn. Always had. Too traditional. Too emotional. Too involved. 1 number left. Eric, her youngest. The soft-hearted techie who still called her Mama when he forgot himself. He picked up immediately. Hey, birthday queen. She laughed lightly. Hi, Eric. You all dressed up yet? Not quite. I was just wondering if you were coming tonight. A pause. Shorter than the others, but still there. Mama. I really wanted to. You know I did. But there's an emergency release at the company. One of the servers crashed and, oh, you don't want the details. Evelyn said nothing. I'll come this weekend, just us. I'll bring Boba and we'll watch Casablanca again like old times. That sounds lovely. You okay? I'm fine, darling, just getting older. Don't say that, he said. You're timeless. She smiled. That's sweet of you. Love you, Mama. Love you too. She ended the call and placed the phone face down on the table. Outside, a family of ducks waddled across the grass. She watched them for a moment, then turned toward the china cabinet. Inside, nestled between photo albums and fading birthday cards, was a slim blue ledger, the savings book Richard had insisted they keep even in the digital age. Evelyn pulled it out, turned to the last page, and stared. Her breath caught. She blinked, then blinked again. The balance was wrong. She turned to her phone and opened the banking app Eric had helped her set up. Her fingers moved slower now, unsure, but they knew enough. She navigated to transaction history. There it was. 500,000 withdrawn 5 days ago. Her heartbeat surged. She clicked the transaction for more details. Recipient CTY TNHH Vuongphat Realty, authorized by Vanessa Tran. Her hand flew to her chest. She checked again and again. No mistake. Her daughter, her blood, without her consent, without even a conversation. It wasn't a loan. It was theft. She sat still for what felt like hours. The tea had gone cold. The jasmine leaves sagged like wilted flowers at a forgotten grave. She stood abruptly, marched to the printer in the study, and printed the full statement. The clack and whirl of the machine was the only sound in the house. With the papers in hand, Evelyn grabbed her coat keys and wallet. She was going to confront her daughter. Now. Vanessa's house was a box of angles in a gated suburban maze, the kind of neighborhood with HOA rules longer than a Bible and neighbors who judged you by lawn height. Evelyn pressed the bell. It was Sophie who opened the door. Slim, perfect hair, expensive yoga set, a too white smile. Oh, hi, Mom. I came to see Vanessa, Evelyn said plainly. She's out meeting a client. Then I'll wait. Sophie hesitated. Inside's a bit messy. Evelyn didn't move. Sophie exhaled and stepped aside. The living room was immaculate. They sat in silence. Sophie scrolled through her phone. Evelyn unfolded the printout and laid it gently on the coffee table. Sophie glanced down. Oh, you knew? Evelyn asked. Sophie didn't answer right away. She set her phone down and crossed her legs. Look, Evelyn. Mom. Right, sorry. Mom, you have to understand. Vanessa meant well. She took 500 million dong from my account. For an investment, Sophie replied. She's helping build passive income. For everyone. For you too. I wasn't asked. Well? Sophie smiled thinly. You're older now. Maybe it's better not to stress about these things. Let the younger generation handle it. Evelyn stared at her, stunned. Did she tell you to say that? No, I'm saying it because it's true. There was a pause. Evelyn stood. You may think I'm old, Sophie, but I remember every time I sold my gold bangles to pay for Vanessa's school books. I remember mortgaging my house so David could attend Stanford. I remember staying up till 3 in the morning sewing costumes for Eric's school plays because we couldn't afford to rent them. She stepped closer. Don't tell me I don't understand finances. I've been surviving them since before you were born. Sophie said nothing. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Evelyn turned and walked out without another word. Back home, Evelyn stood at the foot of the stairs, her coat still on, her face blank. She walked slowly to the fireplace, reached up to the shelf and pulled out a letter, old, sealed in a yellowing envelope, addressed in Richard's handwriting. To Evelyn, for when it gets too quiet. She held it to her chest and sank into the chair. Her eyes finally burned, but she didn't cry. Not yet. The sky outside had grown pale overcast now, as if the sun had grown tired of trying. Inside the mansion, Evelyn Tran stood alone in the kitchen, her breath shallow, her hands still trembling from what she'd just seen. She couldn't stop staring at the banking app on her phone. There it was, clear as daylight. D500,000 withdrawn, not over time, not in gradual bills. One massive transaction gone in a blink. The beneficiary, Vuongphat Realty Company, and just below that the name, authorized by Vanessa Tran, her daughter. Her daughter. Evelyn sat down slowly at the kitchen table, her knees buckling as though someone had kicked them from behind. Her fingers, once elegant and precise, now clawed at the print button on her small at-home scanner. The hiss of the printer filled the silence. The transaction history spilled out one page after another, black ink on white paper too real to deny. She stared at her daughter's name printed beside the transfer, trying to make sense of it, trying to summon some reason, some explanation. Maybe it had been an accident. Maybe there was a business mix-up, a shared name. Maybe Vanessa had meant to call. But deep inside, Evelyn already knew. This wasn't a mistake. This was a betrayal. And it burned. She reached for her landline, dialed the bank. Sunleaf National Bank. "This is Anne speaking. How may I help you?" Evelyn steadied her voice. "Yes, I'd like to verify a transaction from my savings account. A large transfer made 5 days ago." "Of course, ma'am. May I have your full name and date of birth?" She gave it. The operator typed. A pause. "Yes, ma'am, I see that here. On June 17th, there was a transfer of 500 million VND to Vuongphat Realty, authorized via online banking." "Online," Evelyn echoed. "I don't use online transfers." "It was authorized using a saved beneficiary and verified with two-step authentication." The device was listed as an iPhone 14 model registered to Vanessa Tran. Her breath caught. "So, it was not me." "I'm afraid not, ma'am." "Was there a joint account holder?" "No, ma'am. You are the sole holder." Her fingers gripped the edge of the table knuckles white. "Thank you," she said. Then she hung up. The phone slid out of her hand and onto the wooden surface with a soft thud. She stared into the distance for a long while, not seeing anything, only that one word again and again, Vanessa. She moved slowly toward the study. The door creaked open like it was holding its breath. In the top drawer of the filing cabinet where Richard used to keep the house deeds, Evelyn pulled out the folder labeled Family Assets. She laid out the paperwork across the desk. 500 million. That was 2 full years of her living expenses. Her savings gathered from a lifetime of scrimping, sacrificing, and silently doing without. She had given everything to her children always. Her hand touched a photo tucked into one of the folders. A younger version of herself. Her hair still black stood beside a 4-year-old Vanessa, whose smile lit up the frame. Evelyn had just pawned her wedding bracelet to pay for Vanessa's private kindergarten tuition. Richard hadn't known. She never told him. She remembered standing in the pawn shop, fingers trembling, as she handed over the delicate gold bracelet her mother had given her on her wedding day. She'd watched them seal it in a bag like it was a carcass. But Vanessa had gone to that school. She had learned English, excelled. Evelyn had cried tears of pride during that first open house, watching her daughter recite a poem in front of the class. Another paper slid out of the folder, a faded loan receipt. She had taken out a second mortgage when David failed his scholarship interview. Richard had warned her against it, but she insisted. "Our children deserve more than we did," she'd said. That had been the motto of her life. Another memory surfaced, Eric's hospital bill after the motorcycle accident. $80 million in emergency fees. She'd sold her only jade pendant, a gift from Richard's mother, to cover it. Now she had nothing. No jade pendant, no bracelet, no savings, and no call, not even a message from Vanessa. Just silence. It was raining by the time Evelyn pulled up in front of Vanessa's house. A sleek, modern home tucked in a sterile suburb where every building looked like a showroom, glass, steel, marble tiles too smooth to step on. She rang the bell. It wasn't Vanessa who answered. It was Sophie, the daughter-in-law, David's wife, always immaculately dressed, eternally bored. "Oh, Mrs. Tran. Is Vanessa home?" Sophie didn't move. "She's out." "I'll wait." Sophie tilted her head, reluctant. "Inside's a bit chaotic today. Maybe you could—" Evelyn didn't flinch. "I'll wait." Sophie stepped aside. The interior looked like a page from a lifestyle magazine. No mess, no warmth. They sat in the living room, the hum of an air purifier the only sound. "I came about this," Evelyn said, placing the printed bank statement on the glass coffee table. Sophie raised an eyebrow but didn't lean in. Evelyn tapped her finger on the line item D500 000 Vuongphat Realty, authorized Vanessa Tran. Sophie's eyes flicked downward, then back to her phone. "Right." Evelyn didn't blink. "You knew?" Sophie shrugged. "Vanessa mentioned an investment. She said it was for the family. I wasn't told." "Well," Sophie said, smoothing her blouse, "you've always said everything you have is for your children. That doesn't mean you take it without asking." Sophie gave a half laugh, the kind meant to deflect. Mrs. Tran, Evelyn, you're almost 70. You've lived carefully, conservatively. Maybe now's the time to let someone else manage things. Vanessa's just trying to grow what you already have by stealing it." Sophie's smile faded. "Don't be dramatic. It's family. It's not like she took it for herself. She didn't ask. She didn't think she had to." The room turned colder. Evelyn's voice dropped. "I sacrificed everything for this family. Do you know what it cost me? I know you worked hard." "No, you don't." Evelyn stood trembling with fury and sorrow. "You don't know what it's like to pawn your mother's heirlooms just so your daughter can study abroad. You don't know what it's like to boil bones for soup while your children eat imported cereal. You don't know what it's like to sleep in winter without heat, so your sons can have clean uniforms." Sophie's lips parted, but no words came. "I gave everything, and now my own daughter steals from me." Sophie looked away. "I want her to call me," Evelyn said. "Tonight. Not to explain, to confess. She's busy, big meetings. She has until midnight." Then Evelyn turned and left the statement still on the table, the truth burning behind her like wildfire. Back at home, Evelyn peeled off her soaked coat and hung it by the door. Her fingers were cold numb. She walked upstairs to her bedroom, the house echoing with every step. At the end of the hallway was Richard's study, left untouched since his death. She opened the drawer of his desk. There, in a small metal box, lay the letter. The one he wrote before his surgery in case things went wrong. To Evelyn, for when it all feels too heavy. She had never opened it. Not after the funeral. Not when the bank froze their joint account and she had to scramble to feed the kids. Not even when she nearly lost the house to debt collectors. But now she peeled it open. Inside was a single page, Richard's handwriting, neat, full of pressure. "My dearest Evelyn, I know you will keep this family alive long after I'm gone. I know you will give everything and ask for nothing. That's who you are. But promise me this. If the day ever comes when they forget what you've done, if they take without gratitude, if they make you feel like less than the pillar you are, then walk away. Walk with your head high and take everything with you. Because you built this, and you don't owe them your ruin. Richard." The tears came then, not loud, not angry, silent, steady, like rain against glass. Evelyn folded the letter, placed it back in the box, and closed the drawer. She stood slowly, her body aching, and somewhere in that ache something hardened. Not resentment, not revenge, resolve. Because Richard was right. She had built this family, and now she would take everything with her. The mansion was glowing by sunset. Warm, golden light poured from every chandelier, every antique sconce, every hallway lamp. Evelyn had once warned the kids not to leave on. The house hadn't felt this alive in years. From the outside, you might have thought it was hosting a wedding or a grand reception, or at least a family gathering worthy of its size and elegance. Inside, it was just Evelyn. She moved through the house like a conductor before an orchestra, straightening placemats, adjusting silverware, reheating food that had already been reheated twice. She'd turned on soft music, instrumental classics, on an old Bluetooth speaker she barely knew how to use. The scent of jasmine rice and duck stew mingled with the faint perfume she'd dabbed behind her ears, the same perfume she'd worn on her wedding day. In the dining room, the table was perfection. 7 place settings gleamed beneath crystal lighting. Each plate had a personalized name card. Vanessa, David Sophie, Eric Little Ellie, baby Lucas, and herself. The good china was out. The wine glasses sparkled. A small bouquet of yellow lilies sat in the center of the table, arranged just the way Richard used to like them. She had even placed tiny favor boxes beside each plate, filled with candied almonds wrapped in gold mesh. The roast duck rested on a silver platter. The soup simmered gently. The coconut jelly cake, shaped into delicate petals like a lotus flower, chilled quietly in the fridge. Evelyn stood in the doorway of the dining room and looked at the scene with quiet reverence. She had spent 3 days preparing for this. 3 days of chopping, braising, marinating, of ironing tablecloths, digging out old recipes, wiping down cabinets, even polishing the damn floors. 3 days of hoping, despite everything, that maybe, just maybe, they would still come. The clock struck 7. She waited. She sat on the edge of the armchair in the living room, a soft burgundy thing Richard had picked out 30 years ago because it felt like a throne. Her phone lay on the coffee table screen, dark, undisturbed. 7:10. Nothing. 7:20. Still nothing. The soup started to cool. The rice cooker beeped, switching to warm. By 7:30, Evelyn had stopped pretending she was just being paranoid. She turned off the music. She took a deep breath and stood her spine straight, her chin high. She walked to the dining room, picked up her own name card, and sat at the head of the table. She stared down the length of it through the flickering reflection of the candles on the glasses. Empty chairs, empty promises. A soft knock came at the front door. She blinked, surprised. For a moment, her heart leapt foolishly, impossibly. She pushed herself up and walked quickly to the entrance, smoothing her skirt as she went. When she opened the door, it wasn't Vanessa or David or Eric. It was Grace, her neighbor from 3 houses down. A young woman in her late 20s with chipped nail polish, tired eyes, and a kind smile that always seemed too big for her face. She worked nights at the community clinic and lived with her elderly mother. "Hi, Miss Evelyn," Grace said, holding up a small cardboard box. I baked you something." Evelyn blinked, stunned. "It's just a simple carrot cake. Not fancy like what you make. I just remembered you said it was your birthday today." "Oh," Evelyn breathed. "You remembered." Grace looked shy. "Well, yeah. I saw you in the garden this morning and you mentioned it. I thought maybe you might be alone." Evelyn's throat tightened. "I am." Grace nodded, and for a moment neither of them said anything. Then Evelyn stepped aside. "Would you like to come in? I don't want to intrude." "You're not." Grace smiled, stepping into the warm, glowing house. Her eyes widened when she saw the dining table. "Wow," she whispered. "It's beautiful." "It was supposed to be," Evelyn said quietly. They stood in the dining room together for a long moment, before Grace gently set the small carrot cake box next to the centerpiece. It was a humble thing, slightly uneven, frosted with cream cheese that had begun to melt, but it radiated warmth in a way no expensive dessert ever could. "Would you mind?" Evelyn said, her voice barely above a whisper, "lighting a candle with me?" Grace blinked. "Of course not." Evelyn reached for the single taper candle from the centerpiece, pulled out a match, and struck it. Together they lit the wick on top of the small carrot cake. The flame danced softly between them. "Should I sing?" Grace asked with a gentle smile. "No," Evelyn said. "Just sit." So they did. Across from each other at a table set for 7, 2 women from different worlds sharing silence. Evelyn stared at the flickering flame. Her reflection shimmered in the crystal, the silver, the still soup. Then she drew a breath, leaned forward, and blew out the candle. In the hush that followed, she whispered, "I've always forgiven my children, every single time. But this year," she looked up, her eyes shimmering, "this year I think I'll forgive myself first." Grace didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She just reached across the table and placed her hand gently on top of Evelyn's. Later that night, long after Grace had gone home and the dishes had been washed in silence, Evelyn sat alone in the study. The lights were dimmed now, and the house had returned to its familiar stillness. But something had shifted. She had changed out of her dress and into a cotton robe. Her hair was loosely pinned, her makeup washed away her skin, bare and raw in the lamplight. She moved slowly to the bookshelf behind Richard's old desk. At the very top, nearly hidden behind dusty photo frames and old medical encyclopedias, was a black metal box. She pulled it down, its weight oddly comforting. She opened it, revealing 2 things: a small velvet pouch and a legal envelope marked in Richard's handwriting. "Our future, only open if you're ready." Her fingers hovered over it. Then she took it out, set it gently on the desk, and opened the clasp on the velvet pouch. Inside was a fountain pen, gold-plated, engraved, "Evelyn," a gift from Richard on their anniversary. She'd stopped using it years ago, afraid it would run out of ink, as if that would symbolize the end of something sacred. But now she uncapped it. Then she reached for the old will, her original one filed neatly in the folder labeled Estate Planning. She read it slowly, her lips moving silently. It still said everything would be divided evenly among the children. The house, the lakefront land, the shares in Richard's old clinic. She stared at that sentence a long time. Then she picked up the pen. Her hand hovered. She didn't start writing immediately. Instead, she looked out the window. The lake shimmered under the moonlight, a mirror for the stars. She thought of the nights she'd waited for Vanessa to call from law school, of the morning she woke at 5:30 to cook for David during his bar exam. of the extra shifts she worked to help Eric recover from his failed startup. And she thought of that dining table, the empty seats, the cold soup. She looked down at the page and began to write, not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of clarity. The words flowed from her like water finally breaking through a dam. She didn't stop, not until the will had been rewritten, not until she had drawn a line between what she had given and what had been taken. When she finished, she set the pen down. Her hand ached, but her heart felt steady for the first time in years. She returned the velvet pouch to the box, closed the lid, and stood. The grandfather clock struck midnight. Her 69th birthday was over, and something else was just beginning. The morning after her birthday, Evelyn Tran rose before the sun. She hadn't really slept, just drifted in and out of that gray, hollow space where thoughts aren't thoughts yet, just shadows moving behind your eyes. But when she opened them at 5:04 a.m., something inside her had shifted. Not like a storm, no violence, no drama, just a quiet but unmistakable click, like the final piece in a lock falling into place. She made herself a small pot of coffee, strong, bitter, no sugar. She didn't need sweetness right now. She needed truth. By 7:30, she was dressed and ready. The navy blue pantsuit hung looser now than when she wore it to Vanessa's law school graduation 10 years ago, but it still made her feel sharp. She pinned her hair up tightly, applied a soft layer of lipstick, and clasped the string of pearls Richard had given her on their 15th anniversary around her neck. It was time. The law offices of Hoyt and Meyer hadn't changed in 20 years. Same carved wood door, same brass handle, same faint scent of eucalyptus oil and printer toner. When Evelyn stepped in, the receptionist, now clearly the daughter of the original one, smiled politely and led her straight through. He was already standing when she entered. Lawrence Hoyt, or Larry as Richard used to call him, was a man of late age and undiminished stature. His hair, now silver white, was slicked back, and his voice still carried the quiet authority of someone used to cleaning up messy family affairs. "Evelyn," he said warmly, stepping around the desk to offer her both hands. "It's been far too long." She allowed a smile as they shook. "It has. You haven't changed," he chuckled. "Neither have you. Still composed, still formidable." Evelyn didn't correct him. She just took a seat. "I assume this isn't a social call," he said, settling into his chair and lacing his fingers. "No." Lawrence nodded once. "Tell me." Evelyn exhaled slowly and removed the folder from her bag. Inside were the bank statements, the printed authorization records, and the updated version of her handwritten will. She placed them in front of him, one page at a time, like playing a winning hand. He read silently for nearly 5 minutes. His eyebrows rose gradually, then fell. His jaw tightened. Finally he looked up. "Vanessa took $500 million dong from your account without your consent. She used my account and moved the money to a real estate project," Evelyn said. "I wasn't told. I didn't approve. I was left out of every decision." "And your other children?" he asked carefully. David's silent. "Eric didn't even text on my birthday." Lawrence sighed, leaned back, and rubbed his temples. "That's financial elder abuse, Evelyn. You could press charges." She shook her head. "I don't want courts. I don't want a scandal. I want action." He studied her. "What kind of action?" "I want to sell everything," she said. There was no tremble in her voice, no hesitation. The words were solid, final. "I want the house sold, the cafe in District 3. Gone the lakefront plot in Dalat, every asset Richard and I ever built. I want it liquidated and gone before they realize what I've done." Lawrence blinked. "You want to sell the Lakeview estate?" "Yes, Evelyn," he said gently. "This house has been in your family for almost 4 decades, and it has served its purpose," she replied, eyes steely. "But I no longer intend to leave behind museums for people who only visit when it's convenient." Lawrence didn't speak for a moment. Then he leaned forward. "You do realize what kind of reaction this will cause?" "I do." He raised an eyebrow. "They'll be furious, confused, maybe even desperate. They've already caused me pain," Evelyn said calmly. "Now it's their turn to feel discomfort." He looked at her, measuring the weight in her words. "You're going to shock them." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "They gave me a heart attack, Larry. I'll give them a headache." For a moment, Lawrence didn't respond. Then he let out a low whistle and chuckled. "Still formidable indeed." She allowed herself a small smile, but her gaze was distant. "What's the timeline?" she asked. "If you're serious, I can have property agents evaluate everything by next week. The housing market is hot right now. Your house could go in a matter of days if priced right. Don't undercut it, don't overprice it, just move it. And the cafe, list it with a commercial broker. It's been closed for 2 years. David said he'd revive it, but it's been collecting dust. And the land in Dalat. Developers have been calling for years. Find the one who'll pay in full and fast." Lawrence wrote everything down in elegant cursive, nodding occasionally. "And your plans?" he asked. "Where will you go?" She looked out the window, sunlight cutting through the glass and painting soft lines on the mahogany walls. "I've seen a quiet little condo near Seabrook Village. 2 bedrooms, ocean view. Enough space for a reading chair, a guest bed, and silence. You're sure you want to go through with this?" Evelyn turned to him. And in that moment, Lawrence saw the woman Richard had fallen in love with. Not just the wife or the widow or the matriarch, but the Evelyn Tran who didn't ask for permission when she believed in something. "I'm more sure than I've ever been in my life," she said. Lawrence nodded slowly, then stood. "I'll drop the paperwork. You'll have everything by Friday." She rose with him. At the door he paused. "One more thing." "Yes. Do you want me to notify your children after the sales are finalized?" Evelyn shook her head. "No. Let them come home to strangers living in their memories." Lawrence didn't smile, but his eyes softened. "You're braver than most," he said. "I'm not brave," she replied, stepping into the sunlight outside. "I'm just done waiting to matter." And then she walked down the steps of the law office, her bag on her shoulder, her heels clicking against the pavement with precision. The sun had fully risen. Its light fell across her face, warm and unfiltered. She didn't squint. She didn't flinch. She looked straight ahead. And for the first time in years, Evelyn Tran walked like a woman who had nothing to lose and everything to reclaim. It started with a phone call to an old friend who owed her nothing but respect. Mary Evelyn's voice was crisp, decisive. "I need your help selling some properties. Quietly, fast." Mary Ellison had been a real estate agent in the city for over 3 decades. Smart, discreet, the kind of woman who knew how to move luxury without raising eyebrows. She didn't waste time with questions. "Which properties, Evelyn?" "All of them." Mary blinked on the other end. "You mean the house too?" Evelyn stood at the bay window in her study, looking out at the lake. It shimmered with afternoon sun, gentle ripples reflecting like stained glass. "Yes," she said, "especially the house." By the end of the day, they had a list. Lakeview Estate, the cafe on Trenton Avenue, the undeveloped lot in Seabrook Hills. Total estimated value just under $3.4 million. Mary promised to line up buyers who wouldn't ask too many questions. "Cash offers preferred," Evelyn said. "No back and forth, no negotiations for sentimental reasons. I'm not selling memories, I'm selling concrete." That night, Evelyn sat down with Lawrence Hoyt again, papers stacked in neat piles across his desk. Her handwriting, deliberate and unwavering, detailed the directives. All net proceeds from the sales would be funneled into the newly established Evelyn and Richard Tran Foundation, a scholarship fund for children who had lost one or both parents. Lawrence reviewed every line. "This fund, are you sure you don't want the kids involved? Maybe name them as secondary trustees." "No," Evelyn said without hesitation. "They're not part of this. This isn't for them." Lawrence adjusted his glasses. "The fund will be legally protected, tax deductible, governed by independent auditors. You'll be the founding donor. I want the bylaws to say the money can't be used for anything other than scholarships and community development. No administration cuts, no bonuses." "Done." She watched as he sealed the papers into an envelope. Her entire life, the work, the sacrifice, the patience had been converted into a document not even her children knew existed. For once, Evelyn wasn't preserving the past. She was building something that had nothing to do with them. The first to sell was the cafe. David had promised for 3 years he'd reopen it, turn it into a wine bar, maybe a bakery. But all he'd done was let it gather dust weeds creeping in through the cracks. Mary called Evelyn the day after listing it. "We got a full-price cash offer from a couple who runs a vegan brunch chain." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Let them have it." The second was the Seabrook lot. A developer who'd left 2 messages on Evelyn's machine every year since 2015 called again, only this time Evelyn answered. He offered over asking. She accepted without blinking. But it was the mansion Lakeview Estate that took the longest, not because it lacked buyers. Quite the opposite. Mary had 6 offers within 72 hours, people with briefcases and vision boards, a young couple with 3 children, a retired artist who wanted to turn the house into a retreat for grieving spouses. Evelyn chose the artist. "I'd rather see grief turned into healing than profit," she told Mary. When the offer was signed, Evelyn felt something she hadn't expected, not loss but breath, as if the house had been resting on her chest all these years, and now it was lifting. The logistics came next. She hired a moving company, paid in full, asked them to arrive mid-morning but without uniforms or logos on the truck. "Neighbors are nosy," she explained. She didn't pack everything. She didn't need to. The guest room still frozen in time like museum exhibits. Vanessa's ballet shoes, Eric's childhood drawings, David's chess trophies she left untouched. All of it would go into storage. But certain things she chose herself. The wedding photo, Richard's hand on her waist, the 2 of them laughing like fools in the rain. The porcelain tea set from their honeymoon in Kyoto, its glaze slightly chipped but still intact. The red silk dress she wore for their engagement dinner, folded into a cedar box with sprigs of lavender. The letter, the fountain pen, the velvet pouch, a pair of gold earrings her mother had given her, and finally a small music box shaped like a lily, the kind that played only when wound with just enough patience. These things she wrapped in layers of linen and placed gently into 3 boxes labeled Keep. Nothing else. The rest, furniture, wall art gifts from distant cousins, was either sold, donated, or sent to storage with a 3-month rental plan. After that, it was someone else's problem. She didn't tell her children. Not about the sales, not about the move, not about the foundation. They hadn't called anyway. Vanessa sent a text 2 days after Evelyn's birthday. "Sorry we missed dinner. Let's reschedule soon." Evelyn didn't reply. David had sent nothing. Eric had liked an old Facebook post from a week earlier. It was all the confirmation she needed. The condo at Seabrook wasn't grand. It didn't have chandeliers or guest wings or fireplaces the size of small bedrooms, but it had light and air and salt in the breeze. The unit overlooked a quiet stretch of coast dotted with seagulls and the occasional retired couple walking their dog. The walls were pale blue. The windows framed the ocean like a painting. It was enough. Her new landlord, a kind woman named Lena, helped her carry the boxes in. "I can't believe someone like you lived in that mansion. Why'd you leave it all behind?" Evelyn smiled as she peeled the tape from a box marked fragile. "Because a house isn't home when the people inside stop showing up." Lena blinked. Wow. Evelyn didn't elaborate. That night she slept in a bed that wasn't yet hers, under sheets that still smelled of cardboard. She woke once, just before dawn, expecting to hear ducks from the lake. Instead, she heard the waves. It was better. A week later, everything was finalized. The deed had transferred. The wire had cleared. The foundation had been activated. Evelyn returned to Lakeview Estate one final time alone. The movers had finished. The new owner wasn't due until the weekend. The house stood quiet, hollow. She moved through it slowly, touching nothing, just walking as though she were moving through memory. The kitchen still held the faintest scent of cinnamon from the last cake she ever baked there. The staircase creaked in the exact same spot. The study was empty, Richard's desk replaced by blank space and echoes. She paused at the fireplace, pressed her fingers against the edge of the mantel, and then quietly she opened her purse, removed a small envelope, slipped a single silver key inside. She set it gently on the marble counter by the front door. No note, no explanation, just a key. Then she stepped outside, closed the door behind her, and locked it. She turned to look at the house. The ivy curled like veins along the front arch. The windows blinked in the morning sun. She had spent more than half her life keeping this place alive, and now it would go on without her. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She placed the envelope gently in the mailbox, turned on her heel, and walked away. The birds chirped. The sky opened, and Evelyn Tran left her past behind step by steady step without ever once looking back. The sky was already thick with dust when the Tran siblings arrived. David's SUV screeched to a stop, first gravel spitting under the tires. Vanessa's luxury sedan pulled in a beat later, sleek and sterile like her. Eric, always lagging, parked on the curb in his faded hoodie, his phone still clutched in his hand, as if the screen would explain what his eyes refused to believe. The construction site was loud, chaotic. Steel beams lay exposed where the main foyer of Lakeview Estate once stood. A yellow excavator roared as it bit into the remains of the garden wall. The cherry blossom tree in the front yard planted on Evelyn's 50th birthday had already been uprooted. Its branches lay like broken limbs in the corner. "What the hell is this?" Vanessa screamed, stepping out of her car. David stared stunned. "Where's the house?" Eric looked pale, breath-catching. Are we in the wrong place?" Then they saw it. The wrought iron sign at the entrance had been replaced. Coming soon, the Solace House, a healing retreat for widowed and single parents. Vanessa tore past the temporary barrier, high heels wobbling on uneven ground. "Stop!" she yelled at the foreman. "Shut that thing down now!" The man barely glanced at her. "Can't be here, ma'am. Safety zone. Please step back." "This is private property," she snapped. "You're destroying our family estate." "It was private property," the foreman corrected. "Now it belongs to the Solace Foundation. We have legal clearance." David shoved past him, scanning the wreckage as if hoping the dining room table or the piano or even his high school trophies might still be intact beneath the rubble. "Who signed this over?" he demanded. "This is theft." Eric stood frozen at the edge of the lot. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. All he could see was the gaping hole where his mother's bedroom window used to be, now a pile of shattered wood and tangled curtains flapping like white flags of surrender. From the security booth near the entrance, a man in a gray uniform approached, holding a large envelope. "Are you the Tran family?" Vanessa turned sharply. "Yes." He handed her the envelope. "Your mother left this with us for delivery upon site transfer. Said it was to be opened if you showed up." Vanessa snatched it and ripped it open, unfolding the letter like it might give her power. David and Eric crowded around her. The first page bore a legal seal, Hoyt and Meyer, LLP. The second bold text, amended last will and testament of Evelyn Tran. She read it aloud, voice tight. "To my children, Vanessa, David, and Eric, I want you to know that I once believed everything I had would one day become yours. I worked for that. I sacrificed for it. I suffered in silence for years, thinking that leaving behind property and money would make me feel like a good mother. But now I see it differently. Love is not inheritance, and loyalty is not entitlement. You left me behind on my birthday, on holidays, in the moments I needed you most. So now I leave you behind too." Vanessa's face drained of color. She flipped to the next page. "All assets Lakeview Estate, the Trenton Avenue property, Seabrook Hills lot have been sold. Net proceeds have been transferred into the Evelyn and Richard Tran Foundation, a scholarship fund for parentless children. I have retained no property, no heirlooms, nothing for you to divide. The house is gone. The past is closed. Live your lives as you see fit. But you will do it without the benefit of my silence." David yanked the letter from her hands. This has to be fake. "It's notarized," Eric whispered. "That's a legal seal." "She can't do this," Vanessa said, voice rising. "This is illegal." The security guard, who had stepped a few feet back, cleared his throat. "It's very legal, ma'am. She had full ownership, signed everything herself. I was here when the documents were delivered. We were instructed to break ground this morning." David turned in circles, eyes wide. "Why didn't she tell us?" Vanessa's fury turned to panic. She pulled out her phone and called their family attorney. "Jacob, it's Vanessa Tran. I need to challenge a will. My mother's. She sold the estate yesterday. It was supposed to be ours. There's a foundation. She gave everything to it. She can't just—" A long pause. Her face collapsed as she listened. "What do you mean she could—" No, I wasn't on the title. None of us were, but that doesn't mean—" Another pause. Then softly, "I understand." She hung up. David stared at her. "Well, she had full legal control," she said numbly. "Everything was in her name. Nothing was co-owned. We have no claim." David clenched his fists, turned toward the gutted house, and with a strangled yell slammed his hand against the charred wood frame. Sophie, who had been silent until now, stepped forward from behind the wheel of their car. Her face was pale. Her hands trembled. She took one step toward the site and fainted. "Duyen," David shouted, catching her just in time. Eric knelt beside them, shaking. "Call an ambulance." But then he heard something. A soft hum. A car engine. He turned. Across the street, just beyond the hedges, a dark sedan sat parked, tinted windows. The engine idled. The driver never stepped out. but in the back seat a figure sat still. Eric narrowed his eyes. Through the window for just a moment he saw her. Evelyn. She looked straight at him. Her face was calm, composed, not smug, not cold, just clear. She didn't wave. She didn't step out. She simply watched. Eric's breath caught. She's here. Vanessa spun. What? She's watching us. Where? Eric pointed toward the car, but even as he did, it began to move. Slowly, gracefully, it pulled away from the curb and disappeared down the hill, its taillights glowing faintly in the dust. David hadn't seen her. Vanessa missed it, but Eric had. He stood slowly brushing dust from his knees, and in that quiet space between rage and understanding, something finally clicked. She hadn't done this out of spite. She had done it out of finality. She had waited. She had hoped, and when none of them came, she'd closed the book herself. No one else had the right to turn the last page. Vanessa was screaming again now on the phone with someone else. David paced back and forth, furious and humiliated. Sophie was conscious but slumped in the car, crying silently. Eric didn't join them. He just stared at the empty lot, once their family's crown jewel, and thought about what it must have felt like to stand here holding a key and walk away without turning back. From somewhere deep within, he whispered the only words that made sense. She warned us, but no one had listened, and now all that was left was dust. The morning sky over Seabrook Village was the kind of blue that didn't seem real, soft, unbroken, infinite. The ocean stretched out in front of the low-slung schoolhouse like a second sky rippling with promise. Evelyn Tran stood barefoot on the smooth concrete veranda, chalk dust on her fingertips, her sandals discarded in a corner. She wore a simple linen blouse and wide-legged cotton pants. Her silver hair was loosely tied in a braid that fell over one shoulder. Behind her, the sound of laughter echoed from inside the classroom. Real, messy, unscripted laughter. The kind she hadn't heard in years. The kind that vibrated straight through the ribs and into the marrow. Inside, 15 children sat in a loose semicircle facing a hand-painted blackboard she and 2 neighbors had carried from the old fishing co-op. The walls were open-air bamboo and palm-lined with coral rocks, keeping the wind from howling too loudly. Instead of desks, they sat on woven mats. Instead of uniforms, they wore shorts and sun-streaked shirts. Their feet were dusty, their voices unfiltered, and they called her Grandma Teacher. Kozalba, the children, sang out when she walked back in. "We're ready." Evelyn smiled. "Who can tell me what a metaphor is?" A sea of small hands shot up. She pointed to a boy in the front. Tom. Tom grinned, missing a front tooth. "A metaphor is when you say something is something else, even when it isn't, because you want people to feel it in their hearts." Evelyn placed her hand over her chest and laughed. "You've just explained poetry better than any college professor I've ever met." The class erupted in cheers and Tom beamed. At 10 o'clock sharp, she dismissed the group for break. The children scattered like birds, chasing each other down the sandy path toward the tide pools. From her seat, Evelyn watched them go, her hand still holding the chalk. A single thought passed through her. This is enough. Later that afternoon, Evelyn sat under the shade of a tamarind tree, her small table cluttered with pencil-stubbed workbooks and half-finished crayon drawings. She was scribbling feedback on one of Lynn's essays, Lynn being a sprightly, sharp-tongued 12-year-old girl who spoke like a grown woman when a familiar voice broke through the breeze. Auntie Evelyn. She looked up. Grace Lee. She hadn't seen the young woman since the night of her 69th birthday, when Grace had shown up with a homemade carrot cake and kindness too big for her years. Evelyn stood slowly brushing off chalk dust from her hands. "Grace," she said, and her voice cracked before she could stop it. They embraced like family. "You look amazing," Grace whispered. "I look like someone who sweats more now than she ever did at 40. Evelyn replied with a smile. Grace pulled back and studied her. "But it suits you." She walked beside Evelyn toward the small porch that served as her new office. Her eyes took in the scene, the blue tarps stretched across the roof, the mismatched chairs, the faded plastic tubs of supplies. "How long have you been here?" 3 months, Evelyn said. "But it feels like I never left." "You built this from nothing." "I didn't build it," she corrected. "It was already here waiting. I just listened." They sat in silence for a few beats, the sound of waves folding over each other in the background. Back in the city, Grace said quietly, "People are still talking about you, about what you did, what you gave up." I didn't give up anything, Evelyn said. Your house, your assets, your children. Evelyn looked out toward the sand where two boys were using seaweed to fish from a bucket. I only lost what I didn't need, she said softly. Everything else I carried with me. Grace swallowed. I've never seen anyone live as freely as you do right now. Evelyn smiled. Then I hope more of us learn how. A week later, the local TV station came calling. A young crew from Da Nang had heard of the makeshift school by the coast run by a retired woman who used to own a mansion in the city. They came in a dusty van, 2 cameras, a boom mic, and more questions than Evelyn had expected. Is it true? The host asked her during the taped segment that you gave away everything, that you walked away from your house, your children, your life. Evelyn sat in front of the schoolhouse, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her face calm. I didn't walk away from my life, she said. I walked into it. The host blinked. But the estate, your family's wealth, was a cage, Evelyn interrupted. A comfortable one, padded with expectations, but a cage nonetheless. And your children. Her smile faded for just a moment. My children made their choices, she said. So did I. The host hesitated, then tried again. Some people say what you did was extreme, that no one gives up that much without regret. Evelyn looked directly into the lens. I didn't lose anything, she said. I simply let go of what no longer held love. The interview went viral within 2 days. Locals started referring to the foundation by name, the Tran Fund for Lost Light. Donations trickled in. Not large amounts, but steady. A box of second-hand books from a librarian in Hue, a crate of pencils from a stationery store owner in Hoi An. One envelope arrived with $50 American and a note. You reminded me who my mother used to be. Evelyn read every message, saved every letter. But she didn't go online. She didn't watch the comments. She didn't care for headlines. Her work was here. One morning as she was finishing her tea, a small boy ran breathlessly to her side. Teacher. The new girl's crying. She stood immediately and followed him back to the classroom. There in the corner, a girl sat curled up, arms wrapped around her knees. She was about 7, with wild hair and a shirt 2 sizes too small. Tears tracked clean lines through the dirt on her cheeks. Evelyn knelt down beside her. Sweetheart, she whispered, what's your name? The girl hiccuped. My Tao. Do you know why you're sad? The girl looked up, eyes round and full of something Evelyn hadn't seen in a long time. Not fear, but grief. My mom went to the hospital and never came back. Evelyn's heart cracked quietly. She opened her arms. My Tao crawled into them without a word. They stayed like that for a long time. Afterward, when the other children returned to their reading, Evelyn walked outside alone and sat beneath the tamarind tree, staring out at the ocean. Grief never left you. It just changed clothes. But for the first time she was wearing something lighter, something she could breathe in. That evening, Evelyn lit a small candle by the window of her modest apartment above the schoolhouse. She poured a cup of green tea, opened the worn letter Richard had once written her, the one she now kept in a wooden frame on the sill. She read it like a prayer, and then she whispered, You were right, Richard. I didn't owe them my ruin. The waves rolled on indifferent but eternal. The stars came out one by one. And in the quiet, Evelyn Tran, once a forgotten mother in a mansion full of ghosts, smiled into the dark. Because here on this strip of coast where no one cared about inheritances or betrayals or wills, she was no longer waiting to be remembered. She had become unforgettable. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. It started with a soft human interest segment on the local Seabrook station, 5 minutes at the end of the evening news about an elderly woman who had sold her mansion, cashed out her properties, and opened a scholarship foundation for orphans and fatherless children. The anchorwoman smiled as she spoke, her voice reverent, almost awed. They call her Grandma Evelyn, she said. But in Seabrook, she's more than that. She's the mother of a second chance. The report showed drone footage of the children running barefoot across a coastal clearing, their backpacks bobbing like small waves. It showed Evelyn under a tamarind tree teaching with a blackboard and a stick, pausing to pat a boy on the shoulder or help a girl spell out a long word. But it was the line at the end of the segment that would travel the furthest. I didn't lose anything, she had said to the camera. I only gave up what didn't love me back. By Thursday, it was everywhere. Morning talk shows, social media feeds, radio, blogs. Widowed matriarch trades fortune for hope. No inheritance, just integrity. The story of Evelyn Tran. She gave it all away and asked for nothing in return. Within a week, the Evelyn and Richard Tran Foundation had received more than 2,000 letters, some donations, others confessions. A woman from Chicago sent $5 and a note. I never told my mother I loved her before she died. You remind me of what I lost. A class of high schoolers in Oregon held a bake sale and donated the proceeds, $312, and a bundle of hand-drawn cards. But it was the school that cemented her legacy. The government of Seabrook, along with a private educational fund, announced a partnership to build a permanent schoolhouse on the very land Evelyn had once helped clean up after a tropical storm. The Tran Foundation pledged the first half of the construction cost. They called it Evelyn Tran Community School. When they showed her the draft of the sign, Evelyn wept not from pride, but from something deeper, a confirmation that sacrifice could ripple outward. That a legacy wasn't etched in marble or measured in square footage, but carried in footsteps and syllables, whispered by children learning to spell their own names. A few hundred miles away in a glass-walled condo in Ho Chi Minh City, Vanessa Tran dropped her coffee. The mug shattered on the kitchen floor. Hot liquid splashed up her bare legs, but she didn't flinch. She was too transfixed by what she was watching. The TV glowed with Evelyn's face, older, calmer, unflinching. She was being interviewed again, this time by a national network. The anchor asked, "Did you consider your children when you made this decision?" Evelyn paused, then answered, "I considered what they'd already decided, and I matched it with my own." Vanessa's face tightened. She grabbed the remote and muted the TV, but it was too late. Her husband Jonathan walked in behind her. "Is that your mom again?" Vanessa didn't answer. The phone buzzed on the counter. It was her colleague from the firm. "Vanessa, I just saw the piece on your mother. Is that real?" "She sold everything." "Wow, bold move." She turned the phone face down. David called next. "I can't believe this," he barked before she could speak. "She made us look like monsters." "We didn't do anything wrong," Vanessa said, though the words came out hollow. Eric on the group chat only posted a single sentence. "Maybe we didn't do anything, but we sure didn't do enough." 2 days later, Vanessa walked into the offices of Bennett Fields and Yamamoto, one of the top estate litigation firms in the city. She was ushered into a glass meeting room where an attorney in a sharp blue suit flipped through the documentation she'd provided. When he looked up, his face was composed but firm. "You don't have a case, Ms. Tran." Vanessa blinked. "She was our mother. She had no right." "She had every right," he interrupted. "The titles were solely in her name. She executed the sales legally. She updated her will before death, and we verified the foundation is independently controlled. There was no coercion, no power of attorney transfers, no signs of diminished capacity." "I'm her daughter," Vanessa repeated. "Yes, and unless you were on the title deeds or she assigned you as a trustee or co-beneficiary, which she didn't, you have no claim." "What about undue influence? Emotional duress?" "There is no evidence of that. Quite the opposite." "From what I can tell," he said, tapping the news article on his tablet, "your mother was remarkably clear-headed." Vanessa's throat tightened. This was supposed to be our legacy, my children's future. "Then perhaps," he said, rising to his feet, "you should talk to your mother, not a lawyer." She left the office without making eye contact. Meanwhile, in Seabrook, Evelyn's days remained untouched by the national attention. She rose early, walked barefoot along the sand, fed the neighbors' chickens, watered the school's vegetable patch. She taught for 3 hours in the morning, then helped grade papers in the shade, while the children napped or played soccer with a ball patched in 4 places. When a new reporter arrived, she politely declined an interview. When another donor tried to name the new library after her, she requested it be named after the youngest student to die in a flood 5 years ago, Nguyen Thi Lan. "I'm not building monuments," she told Lena, the school coordinator. "I'm clearing paths." But the letters kept coming. One day, a packet arrived, 30 pages of drawings and notes from the first cohort of scholarship recipients. Evelyn opened it slowly. Inside were handprints traced in crayon, photos of proud children holding up report cards, stories written in shaky handwriting. "Dear Grandma Evelyn, I want to be a nurse like my mother. She died during COVID, but now I can go to school. I think she would be proud." Another, "My name is Min. I don't have a dad. but I have a new school and my teacher said I ask good questions. Thank you for giving me a desk and a pencil that is only mine." Evelyn read every letter, then read them again. That night she lit a single candle in the windowsill. She poured herself a cup of warm tea. She sat in silence for a long time, and then she said aloud, "I didn't save them, they saved me." Back in the city, the Tran children kept waiting for their mother to call. She didn't. They kept expecting the media cycle to move on. It didn't. They kept hoping that maybe, just maybe, there would still be something left for them. There wasn't. But something else began to form between them. David reached out to Eric to talk. Vanessa invited them both to her apartment. They sat awkwardly at her marble kitchen island, sipping wine none of them tasted. "We lost the house," Eric said finally. "We lost more than that," Vanessa replied. There was a long silence. Then David muttered, "We made her feel small." "She never was," Eric said. "We just got too big to see it." For the first time in a long while, they didn't argue. In Seabrook, a new semester began. Evelyn stood in front of a classroom full of new faces, their eyes wide, their futures unwritten. She picked up a piece of chalk and wrote on the board, "Today we learn to listen to words, to silence, and to ourselves." And just outside, the school's new sign was hoisted into place. Evelyn Tran Community School, where every child is someone's legacy. The clouds hung low as Thomas slammed the car door outside his sister Vanessa's townhouse. He didn't knock, just pushed the door open and strode in fury, tightening every muscle in his face. Vanessa was already pacing the room, her tablet in one hand, half a dozen legal documents strewn across the coffee table. "You knew about this, didn't you?" Thomas hissed. "You were always the closest to Mom. You must have known something." Vanessa turned on her heel. Her voice was ice. "Don't be ridiculous. I found out the same way you did watching the morning news while my assistant tried to calm our investors." Thomas stepped closer, voice rising. "You were in charge of the real estate proposal. You promised that land was secure. You think I would have sunk $300 million into a blueprint if I knew Mom was about to liquidate everything and turn it into a charity fund?" She snapped back. "You could have talked to her, stopped her." "No one can stop her when she's made up her mind," Vanessa said, voice shaking now, but not from fear. "She wasn't crazy. We just never saw her coming because we stopped seeing her as a person." Just then footsteps echoed down the stairs. Diana appeared with her suitcase in hand, wearing her mother's stern expression. Thomas blinked. "Where are you going?" "I'm moving back to my parents," she said quietly, not looking at him. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. The divorce papers are being drafted." "What, you're leaving because of this?" His voice cracked. "No," Diana replied. "Because of what this exposed. You didn't just lose a house, Thomas. You lost the last person who ever loved you without condition. And I realized, I don't want to become like you." She passed him without waiting for a reply and closed the door behind her with the softest click Thomas had ever heard, like the final page of a chapter no one would reread. Miles away in the small seaside cottage, Evelyn now called home. The wind whistled against the wooden shutters as she read the same letter again and again, her fingers brushing the words like they were glass. "Dear Mom, I don't expect forgiveness, but I need to face you. I need to say that I was wrong, not just in silence, but in action. I watched as Thomas and Vanessa built plans on your back. I let them. I stood by pretending neutrality was innocence. It wasn't. If you can bear to see me, I'd like to come, not to ask for anything, just to say thank you, and I'm sorry. Love, Eric." It had arrived 4 days earlier, postmarked from Arizona, written in the same handwriting Evelyn used to correct on spelling tests. She'd waited 3 days to respond with a single line, "You may come on Sunday, alone." Sunday came warm and cloudless. Eric arrived at 2:15 p.m. He parked far from the cottage, walking the last stretch on foot, gripping a wrinkled baseball cap like a talisman of guilt. Evelyn opened the door before he knocked. She wore a soft blue sweater and jeans. Not the robes of a martyr, not the armor of a mother scorned, just Evelyn, calm, steady, unsparing. "Hi, Mom." "Come in," she said simply. He entered. The scent of jasmine tea filled the kitchen. There were 2 cups on the table. He sat. So did she. Neither spoke for nearly a minute. "I wanted to say thank you," he began, "and I'm sorry for not speaking up, for not visiting, for forgetting that love needs showing, not just saying." Evelyn looked at him, Not the way a mother looks at a child, but the way a survivor looks at someone who almost didn't make it. "I didn't write you out of my life," she said quietly. "I wrote your brother and sister out of my will." Tears welled in Eric's eyes. "I didn't come for that." "I know," she said. "That's why you're here." They drank tea in silence. He asked about the school. She told him about the boy who stuttered through his vowels, but lit up when he finally read his first sentence. He promised to write more often. She didn't ask, only nodded. When he left, he hugged her tightly. Evelyn stood on her porch long after he was gone, the sun brushing gold across the ocean's edge, a breeze in her hair. No, she hadn't forgiven everything, but she'd forgiven enough. Just one child had returned not to inherit, but to understand, and that perhaps was a beginning. The coastal breeze slid through the linen curtains as Evelyn Tran set the final plate on the modest wooden table in her new seaside home. The dining room wasn't grand like the one back at the villa, but it was hers, intimate, uncluttered, sunlit by nature, not by chandeliers. Outside, the soft hush of ocean waves offered a rhythm steadier than any conversation she was about to face. 3 white porcelain plates, no wine glasses, no extra chairs, just 3 name cards handwritten in Evelyn's cursive, Vanessa Thomas Matthew. She smoothed the edge of the tablecloth. The stew was still simmering gently on the stove. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She walked to the door, opened it. Vanessa stood in a conservative beige coat, her face pale as though bracing for a storm. Thomas lingered behind her in a black button-down, his eyes shadowed and sunken. Matthew, the youngest, offered a hesitant smile. All 3 stood quietly waiting. Evelyn stepped aside. "Come in." No hugs, no greetings, no apologies, not yet. They stepped in one by one, glancing around the humble space that smelled of rosemary sandalwood and something unnameable resolve. Evelyn motioned them to sit. She served the food in silence. The clinking of ladles, the shifting of silverware, the creak of chairs. They ate the first few bites in a silence so thick it could split open. It was Matthew who finally spoke. "This is good, Mom. Really good." Evelyn gave a small nod. "It's a recipe I learned here, from one of the mothers whose son walks 4 miles to school every day." Thomas shifted in his seat. "Mom, I know it's too late for a lot of things, but thank you for dinner, for inviting us." She didn't look at him. "I didn't invite your wives, or the children." Vanessa's fork paused midair, we noticed. "I didn't invite the life you built around my sacrifices," Evelyn said, her tone calm but crystalline. "Tonight isn't about your roles as spouses, as parents. It's about the 3 children I raised, the ones I used to read bedtime stories to, the ones who promised never to forget me." Vanessa's voice cracked first. "I was wrong." Evelyn finally looked at her. "Yes, you were." Vanessa blinked rapidly. I don't know what I thought. That money would grow, that it was a temporary use. I didn't think you'd—" Notice Evelyn's voice sharpened, but didn't rise. "I noticed. I noticed when I was alone on my birthday slicing a cake given to me by a neighbor. I noticed when you withdrew money from my account without my permission. I noticed when I realized the only thing left in that house was the echo of my own foolishness." Thomas leaned forward. "We were greedy. We used you. I know that now." Evelyn nodded slowly. "You've lost more than you gained. Do you know what that feels like?" "I do now," he said, barely audible. Matthew looked up. "I was part of it too. Maybe quieter, but complicit. And I won't ask you to forgive me, but I needed to see you. Needed you to know I've left the firm. I've started teaching at the vocational school downstate. I wanted to do something that gave back." Evelyn studied him, her expression unreadable for a beat. Then she stood, walked to the small cupboard and pulled out an envelope. She handed it to him. "This is a letter I wrote the night you called, before I decided whether I'd see you again." Matthew hesitated. "Do you want me to read it now?" "No," Evelyn said. "You'll know when." A heavy silence fell. Then Vanessa asked, trembling, "Why did you even invite us tonight, Mom?" Evelyn folded her hands neatly on the table. "Because she said I needed to say this clearly. I forgive you." 3 breaths taken simultaneously. But she continued, "Forgiving is not forgetting. I will not forget the moment I realized my value to you had been reduced to a property deed and a bank balance. I won't forget that the people I gave my whole life to couldn't give me one evening. Her voice cracked then just slightly. I spent decades being your mother, cleaning your scrapes, making your favorite meals, cheering you through every milestone. And when I needed presence, just presence, you gave me silence. Vanessa sobbed quietly, a napkin to her face. Thomas's eyes were glassy. What now? Evelyn breathed deeply. Now you decide who you want to be. Not as my children, but as people. You want to start over good. Start by being better. Learn what respect actually means. Build something that doesn't need to be inherited to be meaningful. Matthew nodded solemnly. And as for me, Evelyn added, standing, I'm not your foundation anymore. I'm not your guilt sponge. I'm not your fallback plan. I am a woman who found her voice too late to prevent the betrayal, but not too late to walk away from it. She paused, then said it plainly. I'm free now. I suggest you find your own freedom. They sat still. I won't host holidays. I won't be your babysitter. You'll come when you're invited, and you'll leave when it's time. You will not cross the lines I draw. She looked at all three of them. You are not entitled to me. Vanessa tried to speak, couldn't. Evelyn stepped toward the door. You're welcome to stay for tea. There's oolong and some bread pudding I made. If you want to talk like adults, I'll listen. But if you came hoping to convince me to reverse the trust or change the will, the door is there. Thomas cleared his throat. That's not why we came. Evelyn opened the teapot, poured the hot water over the leaves. The steam curled up between them like something ancient, pain, love, rage, memory. Vanessa reached for the pot. I'll pour. Evelyn didn't stop her. Matthew unfolded his napkin again. So this bread pudding. Evelyn smiled just a little. Maybe it was the cinnamon. Maybe the sea air. Or maybe it was the first real moment of truth they'd shared in years. She sat back down. It wasn't peace, not yet. But it was for the first time honesty. And that was the start. The sun sloped low over the horizon, its amber glow casting a warm shimmer over the sea. Waves rolled in rhythmically, their gentle hush melting into the laughter of children. A makeshift blackboard stood planted in the sand, just beneath the shade of a tall coconut tree. Chalk dust floated in the humid air as Evelyn Tran, dressed in a soft linen blouse and flowing skirt, bent forward slightly and traced a cursive G across the surface. What word starts with G, my loves? She asked, her voice carrying over the breeze. Grandma, a boy shouted. No, no, giggled a girl, her pigtails bouncing. Gratitude. Evelyn laughed. Both are beautiful answers, she said, turning to face them with a smile that deepened the crow's feet at the corners of her eyes. But today's word is growth. What does it mean? A small girl raised her hand. It means to become better. Evelyn nodded. Exactly. Growth doesn't always mean taller or smarter. Sometimes it just means becoming kinder, wiser. The class nodded in unison. Behind them, a local volunteer picked up the lesson where Evelyn left off, giving her a gentle nod as she stepped back. She took a few paces toward the water, letting the wind run through her silver hair. She felt no regret, no ache for the villa, no resentment for what had been. The pain had passed, and in its place there was something sturdier and earned peace. That night, her small seaside home smelled faintly of ginger tea and sun-dried seaweed. The windows were open to the breeze, and the dim yellow light of a paper lantern danced on the walls. Evelyn sat at a narrow writing desk carved from driftwood. A single candle flickered beside her, illuminating the fresh sheet of paper beneath her pen. Dearest Lamb, she began. Her handwriting was delicate, careful. It's been many years since I've written you, but tonight feels right. Tonight feels whole. Do you remember how we used to talk about the school we'd opened by the sea? You said it would be painted sky blue with shells for doorknobs and children for music. You laughed when I told you it sounded impossible. Well, I suppose you know by now I've done it. The land is not ours. The classroom is just a shade tree and a chalkboard, and the children's sandals are made from old tires. But they smile. They learn. They call me Teacher Grandma. And when they spell words like hope and future, they look at me as if I've given them the world. In truth, it's they who have saved mine. After you left, I lived only for our children. Every step I took, every coin I earned, every spoonful I skipped it was all for them. But somewhere along the way they stopped seeing me as a person. I became a convenience, a background figure. Until the night I decided I wouldn't let my story end at the dining table we once loved. I didn't sell the house out of spite, lamb. I sold it so I could be free, so I could give others what I once gave without thanks, so I could remember what it means to love without being diminished by it. I hope you're proud of me wherever you are, because tonight, as I write this with salt on my skin and sand beneath my feet, I finally feel like I kept the promise we made to live not for what we leave behind, but for the lives we touch along the way. Yours always, Evelyn. She folded the letter carefully and tucked it inside the little wooden box that held his navy pin, their wedding photo, and the dried orchid he gave her on their last anniversary. Later that evening, Evelyn walked slowly along the quiet shore, a worn shawl wrapped loosely over her shoulders. In one hand she held a small candle inside a glass jar. In the other, her wedding ring threaded through a delicate chain she now wore around her neck. The beach was empty except for the ghostly silhouettes of boats bobbing offshore. She reached the wooden bench beneath the old lantern post, the one built by the village carpenter who never charged her a dime. She sat down carefully, placed the candle on the bench beside her, and lit it. Its glow mirrored the stars above, faint, flickering stubborn. Her eyes followed the tide, pulling itself in and out like breath. Somewhere in the distance, a child was still laughing. Another wave crashed. Then came the voice not spoken but felt, her own voice narrating not to herself but to us. That night, that final dinner in the villa, the voice said slow and steady, as if telling a secret wasn't an ending. The candle flickered brighter for a moment. A wind stirred the edges of Evelyn's shawl. It was the appetizer to a brand new life. Her eyes glistened as she looked up to the stars. For so long, I believed the best parts of me had already been spent in the long nights. The school payments, the 1,000 meals cooked for people who never stayed to wash the dishes. But now I know, nothing truly good ever goes to waste. Behind her, the lantern post hummed softly in the wind. The candle danced. Freedom, she whispered. Real freedom is knowing your worth even if the people you love forget to tell you. The final shot pulled back slowly, gently, as Evelyn sat in stillness, surrounded by the sea, the sand, and the golden flame. No applause, no swelling music, just the hush of waves and the glow of quiet victory.